Recently, the FBI claims it thwarted a terrorist plot to blow up a Christmas tree lighting in a public square in Oregon. The only trouble is there never would have been a plot in the first place if it weren't for something the FBI did that I got into with my friend Bill O'Reilly last night. If there is evidence of coercion, which I have seen in that same affidavit, this is not the proper role of government. Because if government can do this to him,
back on theory again,
it can
because
do it
we
to
said
anyone.
If it is apparent, and I believe it will be, because I don't think Holder, a very liberal guy, the Attorney General, is going to put his neck on the line, all right, and saying, we didn't, we gave him outs. But you still, and I believe you were telling the truth, you still, because you are a stubborn guy, would vote to acquit the man, even if the tape showed he wanted to kill these people, or a child molester wanted to rape the kid.
Wanting to do evil is not a crime.
But
it is a thought. We don't punish thoughts in this country.
The Supreme Court has ruled you wrong on it.
Because you read half the quote. The rest of the quote is, if the government planted the seed in his mind, he's not
If you
guilty.
are on the...
Joining us now, former Representative Bob Barr. Bob, welcome to Freedom Watch. You are not only a former member of Congress, you are the former United States Attorney for the District of Georgia. You are the former Chief Federal Prosecutor for the state of Georgia. You were also a prosecutor in President Clinton's impeachment trial. Question, Mr. Former Prosecutor, lover of the Constitution. How does the government decide who to target when it wants to set somebody up?
Well, it's a complex issue, but one that the Supreme Court really needs to come to grips with, Judge, which is why I'm delighted that you've raised this very thorny issue, where you have a situation in which the government itself controls basically the entire scenario in which a would-be terrorist or other would-be criminal is operating, and therefore the government is able to prevent any crime from taking place. Then they trumpet, they found somebody and they thwarted this plot and so forth. It defies logic. They haven't thwarted anything. They have simply given a press conference or news release about somebody that is entirely within their control. Where is the crime there?
Well, I agree with you. I mean, the actual charge against him, Bob, is attempting to designate or attempting to ignite or explode a weapon of mass destruction. In fact, the truck that he thought he was going to explode was filled with something like sawdust. So it was not a weapon of mass destruction. It was actually, literally, physically impossible for him to have done what the FBI claims he thought he was going to do. So if you define crime as harm, and if there is no harm, why is this guy in jail?
For two reasons, essentially. One is because the war against mind-altering drugs has simply gotten out of control, and a lot of the laws, a lot of the cases that have allowed the entrapment defense to be essentially gutted are because of our zeal to prosecute drug cases over the years. Secondly, it's because of the hysteria that has gripped this nation, Judge, since 9/11, in which we seem to have a citizenry, by and large, and a compliant government that says basically anything that we do to protect you, the American people, anything that we do to get rid of terrorists is okay. So we wind up having essentially one set of constitutional concerns for terrorism cases in which the Constitution means nothing, and another for other cases except for drug cases.
Here's what really troubles me, and I said it to Bill O'Reilly last night, and we ran some of the incendiary parts of the interview in which Bill and I were going back and forth on this. The government targets people it hates, targets people it fears, or it targets an easy mark. But in all cases, it targets someone who causes no harm. Stated differently, if it could target this guy, it could target Bill O'Reilly or Bob Barr or almost anybody. These targets, the government induces them into their criminal activity over a course of years. It doesn't happen overnight. Why should the government be able to do this? Aren't there better things for the FBI to be doing to protect our freedoms?
Actually, there's an awful lot of better things that the FBI and the TSA, for that matter, could be doing than stopping average law-abiding Americans from getting on planes unless they submit to a naked body scan or a very invasive pat-down. There are much better things that the FBI could be doing than essentially targeting Muslim groups They ought to be working, doing a much better job of gaining foreign intelligence and stopping the real threats to this country, not this sort of stuff that gives them a nice press conference.
They could have used this guy as an asset instead of a victim. That's what you're saying. Bob, it's a pleasure. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Judge.
You're welcome. The Constitution is quite clear when it comes to congressional authority. Did you know this? Congress has just 16 listed, limited, delegated powers in the Constitution, plus the catch-all necessary and proper clause that gives Congress the power to use the required means to carry out its 16 listed powers. Only that and nothing more. And the Constitution places an important restriction on Congress. All acts of Congress must be for the general welfare, meaning Congress can only do what benefits everyone. So when Congress funds the Defense Department and the money is properly spent, we all benefit from national security. Earmarks, however, are inherently not for the general welfare. They are selfish add-ons to legislation designed to benefit the narrow interests of a congressman's constituency or contributors, and often to stroke the ego of the legislator who added the earmarks in the first place. So the next time you see a sculpture garden or a bridge to nowhere named after the supposedly noble and humble public servant who used earmarks to pay for it, you know that its creation was unconstitutional. Nevertheless, this week, your Congress voted to continue the practice of earmarks.